Montgomery Community Media presents Small Business Network, brought to you by M&T Bank. SBN is also sponsored by Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and Leadership Montgomery.
Hello and welcome to the Small Business Network. My name is Kelly Leonard. Every month we bring the business community together to network, to collaborate, and to share best practices in an effort to stimulate regional economic development. Thank you for joining us on the live stream as well as here in the television studio. Today's topic is a rather unique one. We're going to be talking about how to sell your business and how to create a buyer through employee ownership. And joining me is a distinguished panel of guests. First up, we've got Kevin Beverly. He's currently the president and CEO of Social and Scientific Systems. He joined the company in 2003 and has served as Vice President of Business Development and Executive Vice President. His strength and experience in leadership, operations, project management, sales, and marketing has greatly contributed to the company's growth. Next up is David Hincapie. He is the Economic Development Specialist and Veteran Business Development Officer in the Washington Metro Area District Office of the Small Business Administration. And finally, we've got Grier Melick. He is a business consultant for the Small Business Development Center, also known as SBDC. His specialties include budgeting, financial planning, and small business advocacy. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
So first up, I know, David, you and I had a conversation a while back around this whole topic of employee ownership. Why is that such an important topic right now? Like, what trends do you see taking place in the world of business that make this a hot topic, if you will?
The principal thing is it's a demographic question. Almost half of all employer small businesses, businesses that have employees in America, are owned by baby boomers. So baby boomers are retiring, and they have to sell their businesses to someone. And there are a few historical facts we know from research and the Census Bureau's survey of business owners and other data, which is that only about 15% of businesses are sold to someone in the family, to say a second generation or some other relative. And we know from surveys of business brokerages that only about 1 in every 5 businesses ever finds a buyer. So what happens to the other businesses? If they're not bought and they're not passed on, then that means they liquidate, they sell. So the business owner who's created value over a period of anywhere from 15 to 30 years doesn't get the full value, because the liquidation value of a business is much lower than for a going firm. And people lose their jobs.
Right.
This may not be a problem for a community if it's a small business with 3 or 4 employees. It's a problem for those people. And I don't mean to minimize that, but I'm saying the community is not affected in a large way. But if it's a business with 20 or 50 or 100 employees, and because there's so many people retiring, so many baby boomers, and it's 20 of those businesses, well, if that begins to happen in a county or a city, then that can seriously affect the prosperity of everyone in that area.
Absolutely. So can you bring those numbers to life a little bit? Like, what do you expect, whether it's at the Montgomery County level or at the Maryland level? What kind of numbers would that look like in terms of what's the potential impact, employee impact, or lost jobs, the impact of lost jobs? What does that look like?
Well, at the Maryland level, there is county level data that is not yet available in easy to use form from the Census Bureau, but there is state level data from 2012 from the Survey of Business Owners. And there are just over 41,000 employer small businesses owned by baby boomers. They have roughly $19.9 billion in payroll.
Wow.
And they have $29.9 billion in sales. So that is significant.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There's a lot of people employed, there's a lot of jobs, there's a lot of work. It matters. Yeah. Now, not all of those are going to liquidate, not all of some, and very many of those are tiny little businesses, 2 employees, 3 employees. But some of those are going to be the substantial ones that I was talking about, right. 20 employees, 50, 100, or 200 employees.
Wow. Now, Grier, let's bring you into this conversation because a lot of people know, like David, SBA. Everybody knows SBA, but oftentimes they hear SBDC and they're like, well, what's that? Can you tell us more about who is or what is SBDC?
Yeah, so the SBDC, we're a nationwide organization actually funded through the SBA. I kind of like to think of us as the SBA's boots on the ground.
Okay.
You know, we're interacting with business owners every day. I sit down with business owners every day and go over their problems, whatever it may be, or solutions to those problems, you know. So SBDC, we're the Maryland SBDC. We have consultants in typically every county in the state, county in the state. And we do no-cost consulting, so business owners can come in and we sit down and go over everything from business planning all the way up through exit strategy, which is kind of why we're here today, and everything in between. Financial planning, again, business planning, marketing, kind of everything they can possibly need. Then we also do a lot of training events. A lot of them are no cost, some of them are very minimal cost, but everything to help small business owners and help the economy continue to move forward.
Okay, so the price is right.
Yes.
No cost.
Yeah,
low
thanks
cost.
to the SBA. Yeah.
You're speaking a lot of businesses' love language when you
Yes.
mention those words. So, Grier, back to you though. A lot of different. So we hear the acronym ESOP or the term ESOP. We hear co-op. What's the difference between? What are those things? What's the difference between the two?
Well, an ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan, and that's a form of employee ownership in which the company's shares are held by a trust, which is the ESOP. It is technically a retirement plan under the ERISA Act, and it's governed by that law. And it's a way for the ESOP is operated with the employees as the beneficiary.
Okay.
So they are the beneficiaries of this trust. A co-op is a cooperative. That's short for a cooperative, and in this case, we're talking about a worker cooperative. There are many different kinds, but we're talking about a worker cooperative in which the people who work in the business own the business. For instance, there is one in Montgomery County. If anyone has ever used Anytime Union Taxi,
Okay.
Anytime Union Taxi in Montgomery County is a worker co-op. All those drivers own that taxi company together.
Okay.
That's fundamentally the difference. A co-op, think of it this way, one person, one share, one vote. So if there are 20 people who own the worker co-op, that means there's 20 shares. Each person, each worker owner has one share and they have one vote. Think of them that way.
Okay. So then both of which become options of a small or a business to its exit strategy.
Precisely.
Why would someone choose one over the other?
Principally, it has to do with the size of the business and the revenue of the business. For smaller than 20 employees, co-op is probably the best way to go.
Okay.
Not always the case, but usually. For 20 or more employees, 30 or more employees, if the revenues are above $1 million, usually around 3 million is the cutoff. You ask 10 people, you get 10 answers, but it's around there. Then you might go with an ESOP. It has to do really with the structure and culture of the company. As you can imagine, with a worker co-op, it's very level, right? One person, one share, one vote. We're all the same. With an ESOP, you have a traditional corporate structure. You'll have a CEO, you'll have a CFO, you'll have people, C-level executives, you'll have managers, senior managers, and then you'll have people on the lower part of the hierarchy in the business doing different things. So there are ESOP companies that are very stratified in a traditional way, but there are some small ESOP companies that are a little more like a co-op. The business owner who sells to either, you can go either way. You can find the one that fits your company's culture best.
Okay, gotcha. So Kevin, your company is an ESOP, right?
Yes.
So tell us more about, were you there when the company what was the company a sole proprietorship, or what was its form prior to becoming an ESOP? And then at what point in that transition were you introduced to the organization?
So just to pick up on you've heard a little bit about what David said about how ESOPs and what they are. So ours is a little different path than most. The company was founded in 1978 as an 8A company, so another designation inside the SBA component of, a protected class of companies who are given an opportunity to level set, grow their base, and then graduate from that program. In 1979, the founder, one of the three founders of the company, died. He was the original founder, and that left the company in this spot where what do we do with the assets, as all three of the original founders were coming of age and looking for an exit strategy. So you really have to think about as you're trying to exit a business like that, what's going to be, you're trying to get your equity out of the business. So let's be clear about that. That's when the equity event happened for Social and Scientific Systems, when the owners or founders sold the company to the employees. So what we had was a situation where a company like Social and Scientific Systems, as a small business, actually did get traction in a mission-driven part of the economy, and that is in public health. And so when the owners, founders, were getting to that point where they were thinking about exiting the firm, it was very important that the work that the company was doing continued. And so that was a motivator for them. So again, they could have sold to a larger organization at that time, but for them that wasn't the driver. And so what they did was to start down this path of creating an ESOP, an employee ownership environment, and an S Corp, which had advantages of one able to get their money out of their equity out of the firm, and then moving that equity to the employees. And as David said, there's generally a trust, but early stage and immature as you're growing as an ESOP, those trustees generally are employees of the company. And at some point, and we're a 21-year-old ESOP, so very, very fairly mature ESOP, you start to recognize the issues that come along with that maturity, the issues around repurchase obligations, because when people are retiring from a mature ESOP, those shares are now brought back into the ESOP, and so you have to deal with that. But so when I arrived at the company in 2003, so they had been an ESOP since '97. And again, as David said, it is a traditional business structure. We're an S Corp, which has some very favorable tax implications for an ESOP, so we don't pay taxes, which is a good thing. And so that gets played into how we're able to, use our resources and funds, because we can put more money back into our employees. Eventually, those employees, when they withdraw, come out of the ESOP, that tax liability goes to them, and hopefully it's at a lower cost than it would be otherwise.
Okay, awesome. So is there, between David and Grier, either of you can answer this question, is there a particular kind of firm that you generally see makes a good candidate for ESOP or co-op?
I think it really depends on company culture and structure.
Okay.
We were talking about this before we started. The democratic level of a co-op, the one voice, one vote, one person, that doesn't work for every company structure. There's some, especially if they have more senior employees or C-suite executives, it's very difficult for them to say, yeah, I'm willing to have the same voting rights in this company as a 22-year-old who may be here for a year or two and then planning on doing something else with their career. So I think those businesses are a lot more the ESOP model. Whereas there are a lot, especially now, you see who start in co-working spaces and things like that, who are very all for one, everybody's doors open, no one's at a higher level, and those companies are great options for co-ops. But it really depends on culture, and then obviously the age of the business. If it's older, if it's more mature, if they're more looking towards that long strategic planning, that can really have a big factor in it as well.
You can also have co-ops that get very large, actually, and have employees. So not everybody who works at a co-op is going to be a worker owner. They can have employees. So one that I know of, because I buy their products, is Equal Exchange. And they import and sell chocolate and coffee, and they were early promoters of the idea of fair trade. Well, they now have 70 worker owners, but they also have employees, people who are not worker owners. And they've grown quite a bit. Their revenues are in the tens of millions of dollars. And so you can have that as well.
So then who makes that determination though? Does the employee decide whether or not they want to be a worker owner, or are you like voted in?
You are. It's a
Okay.
bit like joining a housing co-op. So
okay.
there's different kinds of co-ops. So in a housing co-op, maybe there's an opening. You go and you apply, and there's something like that. Well, with a worker co-op, if you are an employee of a worker co-op, they might say, well, after 4 years, it depends on the rules that they've made, right? The way they've incorporated themselves.
Okay.
After 4 or 5 years, you're eligible.
Gotcha.
Right. Now, if you have the capital to buy into it immediately, you can do so. Very often you don't, and so there is a deduction taken from their earnings that's put towards that. Much in the way that people become partners in law firms. Right. They don't always have the cash to put the equity into the LLC, so they'll borrow money to do that. And so that's the way that it can happen, and you can get very large with a co-op, much larger than people think.
Okay.
Right. Regarding the culture of the kind of company, very often high-level professional services make good co-ops because everyone's basically an equal, right? So you might have a bunch of computer programmers that can turn into a co-op. You might have accountants.
Okay.
Right. We're all doing the same job. We're all accountants. We're all roughly at the same level of education and professional expertise, and so you can do that in that case. So it doesn't have to be just a taxi company.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
It could be different sorts of things.
Okay. And Kevin, from your perspective, living in this world of being an ESOP, what are some of the advantages that you all have seen, that either you personally or as an organization that you believe have come out of this organizational structure?
Well, so one of the things that you have to recognize about an ESOP, it shouldn't define your culture. It's an asset of your culture.
Okay.
Right. So we do. You think about an ESOP, your employee-owned business. There is certainly we have employees and staff who really do take their relationships with their clients very, very seriously because they know they're contributing directly to the well-being of the whole organization.
Right.
And
got skin in the game,
yeah,
right?
they do believe, even though, again, in an ESOP, so it happens in a couple of ways. You have a vesting period, and it takes, even me, I show up, I'm the CEO, but at the same time, I got to wait 5 years before I'm fully vested in that. So there is no jumping ahead of an employee who's just been there longer. And honestly, there are employees in the firm who have, we're a 40-year-old firm, and we've got 40-year employees.
Wow.
And they're heavily vested and have more shares than I do in the company. So while leadership is there to steward the organization, how shares are distributed has little to do with that.
Okay.
Right? So we have a 5-year fully vesting, and people start vesting after 1,000 hours in the firm. But one of the best benefits is on an annual basis, our firm gets a valuation. We go through a professional evaluation with firms out there who do this kind of work, and we get a share price. Being compared against companies that are like our company, and they decide. Those are publicly traded firms because those are the only ones you can get real data on. And we get a share price, and then we distribute shares to staff based on that. So every year, annually, this is a contribution that from our bottom line goes into this trust, as David spoke to, that become a part of that ERISA retirement plan. And at the end of their tenure with us, whether it's they've left to go get another job, there's a period of wait before they can get them, and it's usually a year. But they can take that money out of the plan. And after a certain age, say when you get 55, you can diversify. You can take those shares that are in that ESOP, which you've really been given, and deciding you want to diversify, not have all your shares into the company. You can put it into a 401k, and which we also have. That helps maybe grow your business. You'll grow your money a different way.
Wow. Now, how many employees does Social Scientific have?
We're around 400 and change.
Oh, wow.
And so, again, when you think about a co-op, trying to vote on something.
Right.
That wouldn't be
Yeah, that would
necessarily
be
the best.
Yeah.
So it does. We run more traditionally. There's a leadership. We have a board that truly drives us, and their primary function and focus is on shareholder value, and our shareholders are our employees.
Now, is there anything that says like ESOPs have a like the attrition rate is lower? Like, is there, because I'd imagine either ESOP or co-op, because the employees feel more vested in some way. Is there anything?
Well, you have long tenured employees who are vested,
Okay.
but we're now dealing with a generation of millennials who, as you see, they're not going to be with you generally for 40 years. All right, and so now you're dealing with a population who comes in who are looking for different assets from a company versus just I'm going to come in and be an employee and I'm going to retire here.
Okay.
That's not where their heads are.
Right.
So you're using the ESOP culture, that employee ownership, where they're around people who are, one, heavily invested in the company, have a real commitment to their clients, and a real commitment to the mission of the company.
Right.
So our staff members who've been with us for a long time actually help us with retention of our millennial population because they're just so committed to the work they're doing.
Nice.
Generally speaking, historically, the tenure at ESOP and worker co-ops has been much longer than other companies.
That's what I would think.
Yes,
Okay.
research bears that out.
Gotcha. I'm going to open up the floor for questions. If anyone has a question, you can just go to the mic, but we're going to continue our conversation, so just come to the mic as you have a question. Oh gosh, it just escaped me. The question that I was going to ask, okay, I had the tenure one. If I'm a small business, or if I'm a business, let's just say, how can either the SBA or the SBDC help me to navigate that path? So hold that question, but the other question that I know that I was thinking of that I wanted to ask you, Kevin, was, so is there an education process that goes into, okay, I'm a new hire, so are you going to educate me a little differently about the organization and the structure than you would if I was in some other non-employee owned company, to help me to understand the value of why I'm there and how I play a part of this larger team? Is there an onboarding
I
language?
appreciate that question, and there is. We have, as part of the employee orientation and introduction to the ESOP culture, what it takes to get to be a member of the ESOP, the tenure piece of maturing through 2 years, you are vested at 25%, and 3 years at 75%, and 5 years at 100%. And then we have a couple of education sessions, what we use, our ESOP committee we use to actually do an ESOP 101, an ESOP 201, where we actually talk about what's available to you, how it works, how the companies evaluate it through that process. We also have where people are coming of age and getting close to retirement, what diversification from the plan means and how that works. And so there's a lot of education that goes on during the course of their tenure with the company about what an ESOP is, how it works, how it benefits you. One of the things that we haven't talked about is, as you get in, as we are a mature ESOP, is some of the issues that you have around that issue. So if you're trying to use your capital to grow your business, then you have some issues around what your board does and how they think about share value. If I'm at X as a share value and I say, well, we need to go out to market to get some cash so we can grow our business, invest more in business development or other technical areas. Taking on a loan will affect your share price.
Right, yeah.
And so employees who that year may be thinking about retiring, you could potentially impact their. So those are things that you're trying to help your staff get their head around when you're trying to get growth in the organization, because you know you need to, because at the end you're going to improve that share value.
Right, right.
But if I'm only going to be there another year, why does that matter to me?
Yeah.
So
that makes it.
you're playing with some
I'm
interesting.
sure fewer employees take pens and notepads and things like that because they understand. Wow, I'm like
Any
dipping
cost.
into my retirement every time I take
yes.
something, drink big cups of coffee and pour them out because I didn't really need that cup of coffee. Questions, sir?
Yes.
Yes, Vincent Carpenter from Chesapeake, Virginia. I had a client-specific question for ESOPs and co-ops, and then a global question for ESOPs. You said high-level professionals could do the co-ops. That includes dental practices and medical practices, either for like a single project for like a staffing company or medical office building and heavy equipment.
I'm not sure. Dental so professional. When I say professional, I should have excluded specifically legal and perhaps medical, because I know that the legal profession, there are some details regarding how their firms are structured. It doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means I just haven't heard of them so far. Lawyers who have formed a worker co-op. And that, I think that has to do with the laws in each state regarding how legal firms are set up, you know. And regarding dental practices, I think there are similar differences, wrinkles that affect it. I've not heard of worker co-ops in which it's a collective group of dentists.
Okay.
I can find out for you, though.
Okay.
I'll look into that, definitely.
Thank you. And then the global question is, seeing a lot of these big box retailers going under from private equity companies, kind of milking them dry, shouldn't ESOPs be a way out for employees to buy their companies, particularly like the Sears and the JCPenney's, whose valuations have been crushed to the point where the number of employees that they have makes it right for the employees to be able to do like American Airlines, sorry, and Avis Rent-A-Car in the past to be able to buy the company out?
Certainly they could. That's a decision to be made, however, if those are publicly traded companies and there are thousands of shareholders. Remember, this decision has to be made by the people who own the company, right? So we're talking here about small businesses that might be held, all the shares are held by one person, or in the case of Kevin's firm, there were 3 founders, all the shares were held by 3. And so that's a decision they can come to, 3 people, and there were 2 left, so they can discuss that.
Such as an auto dealership?
An auto dealership, perhaps, yes. But when you're talking about a large publicly traded company, in principle, yes, they could do that, but that would mean 5,000 shareholders would have to agree to sell to an ESOP trust.
Okay.
Can that happen? Sure. Will it happen? I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I would add to that in terms of what you're dealing with in a scenario like that is capital. And so you're now trying to organize a set of employees around how they actually put their money together to do something like that. When you think of a Sears or one of the larger big box stores, there's private equity or venture capital that is going to come into play, which creates a different leverage around that business.
There's a point to be made here. This is the SBA's connection to this, that question of the financing of such a sale. The SBA's connection to this is because recent legislation that was passed and signed last August makes it easier to use an SBA guaranteed loan, the 7A loan program, to finance this purchase. The ESOP trust has to acquire the shares from the shareholders. If planning is done far in advance by the principal shareholder or the ones who closely hold it, you can do this over a period of 10 years and slowly gift the shares to the ESOP trust. Now, if you do it in a shorter period of time, you're going to have to finance it somehow. So you can use the 7A loan for that. That's our connection to it.
And on that note, we're going to need to stick a pin in it. But this has been amazing. Thank you all so much. And see, here's one of the benefits of being here in the television studios. We can continue this conversation. So if you're on the live stream or you're watching this remotely, we're going to continue this conversation. But this concludes this month's Small Business Network. Thank you, Kevin, David, and Grier for joining us. On behalf of Montgomery Community Media and the entire Small Business Network family, we thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next month. Take care and have an absolutely wonderful day.